Welcome back. We're wrapping up our discussion on Chinese foreign interference in our Canadian electoral system. It's such a headline. It should be enraging you, our viewer, and call you to action. Joining me for this discussion is Daniel Dorman. Daniel, when I say call to action, I mean to be educated on these issues so that our viewers are aware of what sounds like is taking place here on Canadian soil by foreign countries. This is not acceptable in the least. Which brings me to how do some of our viewers, how do we trust our electoral system going forward if we see that foreign interference is afoot?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I believe that one positive development is that as a result of the inquiry, flawed as it has been, as we've discussed, there is a bill moving through Parliament, C-70, that is on foreign interference and has some helpful pieces. We mentioned former MP Kenny Chu was an advocate for a foreign agents registry that will be coming into place as a result of C-70. Yeah, I mean, I think it's in many cases it feels like too little, too late, but it is something. So there is some cause for optimism in that. I think Canadians need to watch and make sure that goes through and that there's no, last minute changes to make it a less strict piece of legislation.
The
And,
reason
and I
I
also,
mentioned just 1 second is because when there were allegations, which obviously were proved to be bunk, against Donald Trump that he colluded with Russia in the election. I mean, you couldn't go through a 24-hour news cycle without hearing something of it, and every American knew about this Russia, foreign interference, Russia. We don't seem to have that kind of traction on this issue. Which
mm,
again, our own CSIS has said there's credible interference happening here. Why?
I wish I had a better answer to that question other than just I think Canadians are apathetic and we lack some strong sense of national identity that would cause us to stir in our seats and lose sleep over these things. It was recently Remembrance Day, and the Macdonald Orient State put out a great piece from our Deputy Director of Domestic Policy, Peter Copeland, and he talked about in the piece the desperate need for Canadians to learn from the values and the courage of the past generations, the generations that fought the great wars of the 20th century. And to see that it is it is the freedom that they won that's at stake. Let's put it bluntly. So I do think it requires a wake up call. It requires a lack of apathy. It requires people willing to get involved. Again, we mentioned that a lot of this interference happens at the EDA level or
Mm-hmm.
the district level, the riding level in Canada. So let's get people involved in EDAs. Let's also, by the way, make sure that if we're attached to a political party, that our political party is invulnerable to it. It's not just an issue with Trudeau's Liberals. I don't think
No.
Polyev has dealt terribly well with it in some cases.
Well, and if you're being
And
hoodwinked, I
yeah.
mean, if it's interference and you were not even very aware, it's hard to be even aware of who your nefarious actors are. It's I don't know. I think we're all
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even again in this report from the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, in the unredacted part, it did mention that there were several times that Trudeau was asked to brief incoming MPs, right? Because there's the issue of MPs that are witting, that are intentionally treasonous, for lack of a better word. And then there's the issue of those that are perhaps the phrase that comes to mind is useful idiots. They don't even know necessarily who they're interacting with once they're in office. They don't know, things that they may be spouting that they are actually lines of Russian propaganda, whatever
Right.
it may be. And there's those vulnerabilities. Now, unfortunately, again, that was not something that Trudeau acted on, despite being asked to do so several times. But again, it's something that I mean, our elected officials, regardless of where they're at, need to be or what their political stripe is. They need to be aware of it, and as Canadians, we need to insist that those we're voting for are deeply engaged in this issue and are themselves on the watch.
Really
Uh,
quickly, in the last
yeah.
20 seconds, government recently announced they're going to order the TikTok offices to shut down in Canada. TikTok's still available, though. Is this a step in the right direction? Is this a response to interference? TikTok seen sort of as an arm of the government of China.
And forgive me, my connection did clip out there for one moment, but if you're talking about TikTok, yes, it's a positive development that it won't be allowed to operate in the same way in Canada. That's something MLI has published, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute has published quite a bit on, and it's absolutely something we need to do to protect our information spaces, to protect against disinformation and misinformation. That is a big part of this discussion as well. Absolutely.
Okay, Daniel, thank you so much for your insights today. I appreciate it. And we'll have to have you on again sometime.
Would love to be back. Thanks so much, Tanya.